In a quiet corner of the city of Nashora, where the evenings always seem a little too long and the mornings never quite bright enough, lived a young woman named Liana Verma. She was 27, old enough to carry her own scars, young enough to still feel the sting of dreams she once held too tightly. Most nights, if you walked past her apartment window, you would see the dim glow of a small desk lamp, a stack of unfinished paperwork, and Liana, sitting silently, staring at a world that had forgotten her voice. Not because she never had one, but because somewhere along the way, she lost it. This is the story of how she found it again. Liana worked as a receptionist at a small travel agency. Every morning, she sat behind a counter covered in brochures, pictures of beaches she would never visit, mountains she would never climb, and places she told others to explore, but never dared to dream for herself. Her life was quiet, too quiet. Most days, the only sound she heard was the clicking of her keyboard and the hollow ring of a telephone. But deep inside her, buried beneath years of disappointment, under old wounds she tried too hard to ignore, something still whispered softly. A memory, a song, a voice she once believed was hers. Liana was 12 when the world first silenced her. Her school held a singing competition. For weeks, she practiced day and night, singing in the shower, singing while sweeping the floors, singing until her mother laughed and said, "Liana, the neighbors will think we're raising a nightingale." She believed she was meant for the stage. She believed she was born to sing. But on the day of the show, something happened. Her hands trembled, her throat tightened, and halfway through the song, her voice cracked, a small, fragile sound, barely a breath, but enough to break her. The room fell silent. Then came the laughter, sharp, quick, cruel. Her teacher, Mrs. Talwar, pulled her aside afterward and said gently, too gently, "Liana, some people are made for the stage, and some are not. You should focus on your studies." Liana nodded, but inside, she shattered. That night, still trembling from humiliation, she told her father she wanted to learn music properly. Her father sighed, the kind of sigh heavy enough to close doors. "Liana," he said, "music doesn't pay bills. You need a real job." Another crack, a deeper one, and slowly, year after year, she stopped dreaming, and eventually, she stopped singing too. Now, at 27, Liana's days blended into one another, like pages from a book she didn't remember choosing. Her life wasn't painful. It wasn't tragic. It was simply silent, too silent. Every night before falling asleep, she felt something inside her whisper, "Sing again." But she always whispered back, "I can't." And so another night would pass, and with it, another piece of her. But one evening, everything changed. Liana missed her bus after work. Rain poured down in thick, relentless sheets, turning the street into a blur of lights and water. So she ran, cold, soaked, desperate for shelter, into a small cafe she had never seen before. The sign above the door read, "The Raindrop Room." Inside, the world felt different, warm, dim, alive. Soft yellow lights glowed above wooden tables. The smell of wet coffee beans filled the air. And in one corner stood an old piano, its surface scratched, its keys worn by time. An elderly man sat before it, playing a melody that sounded exactly like the storm outside, gentle, aching, full of memories. Liana froze. The music wrapped around her like a forgotten embrace. When he finished, she clapped softly. The old man looked up and smiled. No spotlight, no applause, just two strangers sharing the quiet beauty of a fading note. His name was Master Rohan Dev. They talked, a little at first, then a little more. Liana told him what she did for a living. He nodded politely. Then, out of nowhere, he asked, "And what about music?" Liana froze. Her heart stuttered in her chest. How did you know?" The old man smiled gently. "Your eyes," he said. "They looked at the piano like someone staring at something she lost." She laughed nervously. "I used to sing, a long time ago." "Used to?" he asked. "Why did you stop?" "Because," she whispered, "because I wasn't good enough." Rohan stared at her for a long moment. Then, in a voice soft as rainfall, he said, "You do not stop being a singer just because someone said you are not. You stop being one when you believe them." The words struck her like thunder, quiet, but shaking something deep inside. When Liana left the cafe, Master Rohan handed her a small napkin. On it, in shaky handwriting, were the words, "Tomorrow, 6 p.m., bring your voice." She almost threw it away. She had work, deadlines, life. But something, the same voice that had whispered inside her for years, said softly, "Go." And so the next evening, she returned. The cafe was nearly empty. Only 2 customers sat in the corner reading newspapers. Master Rohan was waiting by the piano. "Good," he said. "Now sing." "What, here, in front of people?" "Yes," he replied. "If you can sing for one stranger, you can sing for the world." Her hands shook. Her throat tightened. I can't." "Then hum," he said. "Let your fear hear your voice again." So she closed her eyes, took a slow breath, and hummed. The first sound trembled, frail as a wounded bird. But slowly, it grew steadier, warmer, alive. When she opened her eyes, Master Rohan was smiling. "You didn't forget how to sing," he said. "You only forgot how to believe." The days turned into weeks, and every evening Liana returned to the raindrop room. Sometimes they practiced scales, sometimes breathing. Sometimes they just sat in silence while the rain tapped against the windows. One evening, she asked him, "You said you used to play for a living. Why did you stop?" Rohan's eyes softened. He stared at the piano keys the way a man stares at a grave. "I lost my wife," he said. "She was a singer. After she passed, every note hurt, so I stopped playing for a whole year." Liana looked at him gently. "So how did you start again?" He smiled faintly. "A little girl came into this cafe one day and asked me to teach her a song, and in that moment I remembered something." "What?" she asked. "That music doesn't just express joy," he whispered. "It heals pain." His words stayed with her. Months later, Liana's office announced a talent evening. Everyone was excited. Dancing, comedy, music. Her co-worker Sanvi said, "Liana, you should sing." She laughed. "No, I don't perform anymore." But that evening, she told Master Rohan. "So," he asked, "will you sing?" "No way," she said. What if I fail again?" Rohan smiled gently. "Fail? Liana, you already failed once when you stopped singing." He leaned closer. "You cannot fail twice unless you stop again." Something inside her cracked, then opened. She signed up. The night of the event arrived. Backstage, Liana's heart raced. Her palms were cold, her breath shallow. Her chosen song, "Somewhere Over the Rainbow." When they called her name, her knees shook. She walked up. The microphone felt heavier than it should. The audience chatted. Ate snacks, laughed, completely unaware of the storm trembling inside her. Then, as she looked out over the sea of faces, the old voice returned. "You're not made for this. Remember what happened last time?" They laughed. Her chest tightened, her vision blurred. She wanted to run, to disappear, but then, at the back of the hall, she saw him, Master Rohan. standing quietly, smiling. He nodded, slow, steady, as if saying, "It's your turn now." Liana took a breath. The first line cracked, the second, steadier, the third, strong. By the time she reached the chorus, she wasn't afraid anymore. She was alive, more alive than she had been in 15 years. When she finished, the room fell silent. Then, applause, loud, real. Liana cried. Not because she sang perfectly, but because she sang again. The next evening, Liana returned to the raindrop room to thank Master Rohan. But the lights were off, the windows dusty, a faded for sale sign hung on the door. Confused, she asked the shopkeeper next door, "Where is Master Rohan?" He looked at her sadly. "You mean old Rohan Dev? He passed away 2 months ago." Liana froze. "No, that can't be. I saw him last night. He was at the event." The man shook his head gently. "No, ma'am. The cafe's been closed for weeks." Liana stepped back. The world seemed to tilt. Rain began to fall, soft at first, then harder. As she turned to leave, she saw something on the ground, a small, wet napkin, folded neatly. She picked it up. The ink, though faint, was still readable. "You sang. I heard you. Keep singing. For both of us." Tears flooded her eyes. The rain blurred the world around her. But the message was clear. He had given her the one gift no one ever had: belief. A year passed. Liana still worked at the travel agency, but every weekend, in a small cafe not far from where the raindrop room once stood, she sang. Love songs, old songs, even songs she wrote herself. Sometimes, if you sat in the right corner, you'd see her glance toward the empty table on the left, the one she always saved, as if she were waiting for an old man with kind eyes and music in his soul to walk in and sit down. People began calling her the girl with the morning voice, a voice soft like dawn, warm like hope, gentle like a promise. And Liana finally understood what Master Rohan meant. Music wasn't about perfection. It wasn't about applause. It wasn't even about talent. Music was about healing the parts of yourself that went silent. Maybe your dream isn't singing. Maybe it's painting, writing, cooking, teaching, traveling. Or something you once loved, but abandoned because someone told you you weren't good enough. If that's you, listen closely. Their voice does not belong in your future. You don't need permission to start again. All you need is courage, and sometimes, the people who help us the most aren't meant to stay forever. They appear just long enough to remind us who we are. So if your life has gone quiet, pick up your dream again. Even if your hands shake, even if your voice cracks, even if you're terrified, start again. Because one small note can bring a whole song back to life. And maybe that song will be yours. If this story touched your heart, take a deep breath. Let your voice return today. And remember, the world still needs the song only you can sing.